Now over to the Middle East, where a fragile ceasefire between Israel and Iran is now in place, ending 12 days of high-intensity war. But global scrutiny over the conflict's cost and claims is only growing. On the ground, the violence has left a heavy human toll. In Tehran, Syed Hamidian lost his wife and daughter to an Israeli airstrike. He survived but now lives injured in hospital. Speaking through tears, he says he's not a soldier, just a self-employed man, and has no idea why his home was targeted. He called for justice. Let's take a listen in to his comments.
من اومدم تیشرتمو عوض کنم یه دفعه دیدم یه چیز وحشتناکی نمیدونم حالا یه دفعه خورد تو ساختمون همین که شیشه هامون خورد شد کف ساختمون یه دفعه آوار شد رو به پایین خانمم و دخترم رو دیگه ندیدم بود بچه نمی تنگی بیاشه نه من نظامی نبودم میتونید بپرس من نظامی نبودم من کارم آزاده پاسخی که در خورش باشه زن و بچه مردم بیگناه نکش زندگیم 42 سال زندگیمون نابود که.
Now, in related news, Iran's health ministry now reports over 600 civilians that have been killed and more than 5,000 that are injured. In an independent US-based group, Harana puts the toll even higher, over 1,000 that have been killed. Israel says 28 of its civilians have died by Iranian missile and drone attacks that struck deep into Israeli territory and damaged hundreds of homes and schools. To give you some background, the war began on June the 13th when Israel launched surprise strikes on Iranian nuclear and military facilities, killing top commanders and scientists. Then it led to Iran's response with mass bombardments. Over the weekend, the United States joined the fray, targeting Iran's nuclear sites at Natanz, Fordo and Isfahan, with bunker buster bombs and Tomahawk missiles. US President Donald Trump hailed it as a military triumph, saying the strikes had, quote, completely obliterated Iran's nuclear capabilities. But today, a leaked US intelligence assessment tells us a different story. According to a preliminary report by the Defense Intelligence Agency, the strikes have only delayed Iran's program by months and not years, as previously stated. Underground centrifuge halls were not destroyed. Uranium stockpiles remain. Some damage was confined to entrances and surface structures. This is what the US intelligence report states. The White House, however, has strongly rejected this leak. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt called the assessment flat out wrong and the leak itself a smear campaign against the president. Meanwhile, European powers are urging diplomacy. France has warned of sanctions that could snap back if Iran doesn't return to diplomatic talks. The United Kingdom has also called on Tehran to prove its nuclear program is peaceful. Iran's UN ambassador said the attack only underscores that dialogue, not force, is the only way forward. Iranian President Pezeshkian called the ceasefire a great victory and said Iran is ready to resolve differences with the United States and Gulf nations. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has also claimed success, declaring that two existential threats, nuclear annihilation and missile attack, had been neutralized. He praised President Donald Trump as Israel's greatest ally, but Israel's job isn't done, citing the ongoing war in Gaza and efforts to rescue hostages. Tensions still linger, with both Iran and Israel trading accusations of violating the truce within hours of it being announced, though no fresh attacks have been reported or confirmed since Tuesday. Trump has scolded both sides, especially Israel, for escalating. He said they've fought so long they don't know what they're doing, using a swear word. in the process. And his envoy, Steve Witkoff, confirmed back-channel talks with Iran are ongoing and described them as, quote, promising. He called the intelligence leak treasonous. As schools reopen across Israel and Iran prepares funerals for its fallen, one question now looms large. Is this ceasefire the start of peace or just another pause before war resumes? We're now joined by our guest today, Stephen Nagy, who's the professor at the International Christian University located in Budapest. Stephen, thank you very much for joining us on the program.
Thanks for having me.
This ceasefire is now officially in effect, with no new strikes being officially announced by official channels. However, there is an evident fragility to this, with claims of violation from both sides. How do you see the stability of this ceasefire ongoing, and do you think diplomatic efforts will continue given the current state of the ongoing relationship between both the United States, Iran and Israel?
Well, I think we can understand the progress of the peace, or whether the peace will remain stable based on the Israeli and the United States assessments of what kind of damage they actually did to the Iranian nuclear facilities, whether it really is a permanent destruction of their nuclear capabilities, or if it just, as the leaked reports said, has only put back the nuclear development over a few months. Second, I think the willingness of the Iranians to come to the table and engage in negotiation with the United States and perhaps European partners, or a third partner. And third, I think importantly, is the broader sentiment on the ground in Iran. Are the Iranians supporting the regime? Are they pushing for some kind of change? And how can we best understand this? And I think at all three levels, there's a lot more ambiguity than there is some concrete detail in terms of where we sit at this particular stage of the conflict.
Stephen, you briefly mentioned about the idea of regime change. Netanyahu, throughout when the conflict was at its peak, the idea of regime change was constantly floated by the Israeli Prime Minister, along with briefly mentioned by Donald Trump. Israel says its targets have now been achieved. Has Netanyahu made a complete U-turn here?
I suspect not. The threats to Israel's existence, whether it's through conventional, destroying it through conventional means or nuclear means, have been long-standing from Iran. So I think that the Benjamin Netanyahu and his ruling elite most likely favor the complete destruction of all nuclear capabilities in Iran, and they probably prefer a change in the regime, hoping for a more cooperative government that is interested in coexistence and recognizing Israel's right to exist. Whether this is possible, this is a very, very different question. At this particular stage, I think that we don't know, how much anti-regime sentiment exists in Iran, and whether these attacks by Israel, and we should remember it was Israel that attacked the Iranians first, did they create a more nationalistic approach to having a cohesive approach to fighting back against Israel and the West, or has it created divisions within Iran and weakened the regime and created and emboldened some other power centers to be challenging that regime? And we just don't know at this stage.
Stephen, and also what we've had today is Donald Trump being challenged by an outward body in the U.S. intelligence, saying that these B-2 strikes have only delayed Iran's nuclear program by a few months and not completely destroyed it. Caroline Leavitt came out today and said that this was a smear campaign. What are your thoughts on this also damaging Donald Trump's rhetoric, or the narrative he's trying to push? As in America, who do you trust in these situations, where if it's the President of the United States saying one thing and then these external bodies saying another?
Well, I think, again, we need to wait until the intelligence assessments come in. And, it's not just the American intelligence assessments that we need to consider. It's Israelis and other other intelligence agencies that are looking at the exact damage that did take place, and if they did have the ability and were successful in completely destroying these nuclear facilities and their ability to produce, material for nuclear weapons. We just don't know at this stage, and my assumption is that we're not going to know. The Iranians are not going to let us into the country to see if the systems have been destroyed. But at the same time, I think that there is internal resistance in the United States and amongst different political parties, political interest groups to try to delegitimate President Trump's initiative to try and wipe out Iran's nuclear capabilities. This is something that always existed in the United States. Which should we believe? At this stage, I wouldn't believe any. I think we need to really wait for the coming weeks to get a much better assessment of where the Iranians are, how the Israelis are going to react to this, and again, what capabilities the United States can bring comprehensively to get a better assessment of the actual damage they've done to Iran's nuclear capabilities.
Stephen Naji, thank you very much for joining us on the broad